Okay, so now that we have been through the entire control costs process here in the 6th edition of the PMBOK as part of the Crowds Training Interactive course, let's quickly review the inputs, tools, techniques, and the outputs. Starting with the inputs, we have the plans, of course. Well, what was it that we are planning to do? And that will, of course, allow us to monitor and control it. So the project management plan, and the obvious plan in there would be the costs. How are we planning to manage it, and what was our plans, and what do we need to be looking for? But there could be other things in there, like we had when we determined the budget, we had the cost baseline, and that also includes the other baselines like schedule and scope to form a performance measurement baseline. But all of these plans are what we're going to be using in order to tell whether or not we're on track or not. We're also going to be using various different project documents that could potentially also assist us in determining whether we're doing well or not doing well. Maybe things like the lessons learned or other documentation that's going to give us some assistance. And if our project money or financing or funding is coming in at different stages throughout, well, then that's of course going to influence how we think about and if we are in fact doing well in terms of our financing and our accounting. Is in fact, if the money is coming in at different ways or different times, then our numbers might fluctuate accordingly, and we need to be aware of that information. But also too, how the project is going, and however tool we have that is monitoring that information. I'm just going to kind of create some generic monitoring device. I don't know what it actually is going to monitor, but just to reference or to give an illustration for things that is representing the work performance of our project and that data that is coming in however we want to have it captured. And then we always have our templates and our tools that are going to be useful for us, and that is our organizational process assets. And those are inputs. From there, we have various different tools and techniques to use. We can always tap into the judgment and experiences and knowledge and education of those stakeholders within our organization to help us give our expert judgment and make decisions and determinations about how things could or could not go or should go. And there are various different ways to analyze how things are going. So as this data is coming in, we need to make sense of it. What does it mean? And that's, of course, looking at the plans and the documentation and the funding, everything else. But trying to determine what does it mean and making sense of it. So maybe even putting the magnifying glass to it to try to get a better sense of what it is and try to make some interpretations. Things like our earned value management, which we went through in much detail, looking at the trends and the variances. So, if things are here and they're supposed to be there, looking at the difference between those two, and then many others that could also be of use. From there, we also have one that is separated out now in the 6th edition of the PMBOK, which is the 2 complete performance index. And that is an index, hence its name. But we're looking at, well, if we're at this point in the project and we want to be at this point at the end of the project and we're only at here, how do we get here? No matter what has happened historically up to this point, what is it going to take? At what clip or what rate should we work towards or with to get a 2 complete performance index that we know that if we're going to get from point A to point B, what is it going to take to enable us to get that? And that's another reference point or another tool that we're going to be using to help us determine how best to control or what actions we need to take in order to reach our objectives. And one other to be aware of is that we could have various different project software that would be our project management information systems, the various different ability to crunch the numbers and to make sense of it, to make a look and feel and understanding of what it means and how it works. Those various different software makes things, or at least as a project manager, should make things easier as we are trying to determine how best to control our costs. Well, what we get out of it then is if here we had data, at the end we're going to have information because we've made sense of it, we've analyzed it, and so this is how the project is going or the work. So it's our work performance information. But we can also take a look at that if we're at this point in the project, then as the project is going further out, this is my little sunset there, I can try to make forecasts to figure out these costs in the future moving forward. We can also get some understanding of, well, where things need to change and why. And so we can suggest changes. We're not going to make the changes here because that's part of a different process, but we're going to request changes and we're going to update our plans, whatever plans need updating based on the decisions, what we've looked at, probably the cost plans, but could be any of the plans, as well as the documentation that we've been using throughout, like the lessons that we've learned and the assumptions that we've made, and maybe even too, the costs that we've estimated up to this point maybe have been so far off, good or bad or indifferent, and we should probably make changes in that cost estimation as well. And so those are just a few examples of project documents that are updated, as well as your project management plans. Your other output is your cost forecasts, your change requests, and your work performance information. And overall, that is the inputs, tools, and techniques and outputs of the control costs process in the 6th edition. And we, of course, went through all this in the Crowd Training's interactive online PMP exam prep course.